Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, culture, change, claims, and everything else that we want to talk about. As always, we've got the news. We've got the third part of our interview with Jonathan Clark, formerly at Score and now an independent consultant. Today, talking about delivering change, hence the title. Who's leading that and delivering change in the London market? But before we get into that, there we are. Seconds away, Bell. We've got the news. I've got some news. Kick things off, Ben. So the first piece of news is we've got a conference coming up. We've got Digital Claims Week on Tuesday. We've even got a little bit of video. Look at that! Wow. No, we pushed the boat out. Smashing
multimedia.
So yeah, Digital Claims coming up week on Tuesday. So I only mention it because it's more GI focused, but we've been talking a lot about change and how the pandemic has really forced organizations to look at their operating model and how they use digital and change. And I think claims is at the cutting edge of a lot of that stuff. You know, if you think about, especially in the GI space, but also in the London market space, the way that customer expectations and client expectations are changing, are driving a lot of this change. It's not only technology-led change, it's been driven by customers. And I think claims as a function really needs to think about this. And I think in the interview we talk about this transition period that we're now in from this 2020, where we've had all this change and disruption, and what our business and claims operator models are going to look like afterwards. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's a really good mix of people that we've got on the panels, and yeah, it should be a good event.
Yeah, it'd be really good. We've seen a lot of impact of technology within claims in the research that we've been getting back. So definitely a correlation between that. When you get it right with the people, it's definitely an area where some of the bigger businesses too are thinking about how they take it forward from kind of basic MI type stuff into things like live chat, chatbots, all that sort of stuff. So it is it's interesting, really interesting area. Yeah, it should be good. I'll be there.
Good, excellent. So the other big news this week, I found out today from Accountancy Age, this is an email I received this morning at 8:32, that apparently there was a budget and there's going to be significant corporate tax rises. Nothing like being on top of the game at Accountancy Age with the timing of an email 2 days later than the actual budget take.
Nothing like accountants telling you what you already know.
Yeah, brilliant.
Taking a fee.
But yeah, here we go. So big news this week. Budget 21, key points at a glance. I can do it in just an image. Yeah, loads of money. We got to pay it back. It's a cultural reference there for the kids. I'm sure they will get it. But yeah, lots of money to pay back. It's quite interesting, the politics of it all, but you know, it's for the long term, isn't it? This stuff. No, it would have been nice.
Well, I think so, and I think there's a fix which we've talked about. There's some very interesting articles which do relate to everybody really about whether you can now have very much more radical policies and thinking going forward, which I guess they're not really doing quite yet, but there's possibilities for that, you know, and particularly with Brexit in the UK. Yes, another interesting angle, isn't it, as we move into the future?
Yeah, definitely. Right. We've also got, moving into the London market, we've got some news. This surprised us both, didn't it, Ben? Andrew.
Well, pretty good at predicting things on here, but not this. No, this was a big surprise. So Andrew Horton, after 30 years moving to QBE from Beazley to take the CEO role of Richard Price, who's currently the interim CEO. And this is a very interesting move. I thought about it as I suspect everybody has, as to what might be the rationale. Andrew's had a very successful career at Beazley. It's in pretty good shape. I think That would be something we would also say from our research. It's a really good business that he's built. After some really great founders as well in Andrew Beasley and Nick Furlong. So I believe he's done a brilliant job there, and I know Andrew, and he's a fantastic guy with some real sort of pedigree, and I think he's forward thinking and he's broad and kind of unflustered about how he does things. I really like him. I'm sure he'll do a great job at QBE. Why would he go? Well, QBE to some extent might well and is probably turning a corner. So there's a good opportunity for him to instill some of those things he's done at Beasley. And I think, to be fair, although QBE has had a bit of an up and down recent history financially and with its executives, to be fair, he, and someone like Richard Price, who I also know, I think they are both quite forward thinking, and there's a lot going on at QBE that I think would be aligned with the work that's gone on at Beasley. So I feel that he's, at that level, he could probably see this as he's 58, I think it says here, and he's got another 4 or 5 years, or in this industry, probably another 25 years, knowing some of the people running businesses. But he may see it as 5 years, I guess, to do another big job and make something of QBE. So it's really interesting. And do you want to know what he's getting paid? You do, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
Important stuff. $1.8 million fixed salary. He gets an extra 2.7 million in short-term bonus, and with long-term share options, another 3.6 million.
Round of applause there.
So that's not bad.
All right, Nick. That's okay.
Nearly what you're paid, Jeremy.
It is almost, yeah. Anyway, we have got some. We'll watch that. That's. I think it's going to be. It is an interesting move, and I think we'll watch that space and see how things develop. We've got one other bit of. Two other bits of news that we haven't got clips for, but it was Sequel buying Whitespace. We wanted to mention as well, didn't we?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's one thing we've been talking about on here about how Lloyd's through Blueprint 2 effectively kind of opened up the competitive space for software providers in the e-placement area and other areas. It's Sequel's huge. It's a lot of money investment coming into that, so they must have seen something there that really ratchets up the competition now with PPL. So we'll, you kind of expect to see things going on at PPL around what they do in response, but that's become just really, really, really interesting. I mean, it's, one level it's a sell. You could say it's a sale of the business, for the founders, which is great for them. But it's more fundamental. It's really about a race now. That kind of arms race of technology, I think, that's starting to happen, and I bet it has taken, probably even Lloyd's by surprise. And I felt that they perhaps wouldn't have been quite as aware of what could happen once they opened this up, because it just didn't seem that they addressed that when they did Blueprint. They didn't. It was a sort of side note almost of the Blueprint 2. But to me, it's always been the biggest thing. Is once you open up the competition in this market, it's a very attractive area. It's behind in many ways, as we know. So the opportunities are huge, and there's a lot of capital around who want to take advantage of that. So, watch the floodgates open and the competition begin. It would be very good, very interesting.
It's a really interesting move. It's a big move, and one that I think will stir the pot a bit on that front. The other thing we're going to mention, coming back to predicting things, something we did predict is the Hiscox saga continues in the BI space. Saw press releases today saying that they are going to struggle to regain trust with those clients. Again, I think something we talked about as well. It was bigger than a financial thing. It was about brand, and we talked about brand and loyalty and reputation a lot on this show. And I think it's coming to, those predictions are coming round to be true, which is not great. It's not something we revel in, but it was.
No, it's, and it's not. I mean, even Bronek Masciada, the chief exec, said this, that he doesn't. He kind of regrets some of it. That's what I think his exact words were. It's too late, really. I think you've really, really got to think about the long-term strategy and what you've built. I still scratch my head over it. I still scratch my head over the decisions. There were probably, reasons why, but it's, yes, the results were very disappointing, and the whole discourse around it in the press and so on is not going their way at the moment. Whether they'll turn it around, I don't know, but I don't. As you say, we don't revel in distress of businesses in a market which we support, but I do feel there's going to be some tough times ahead for Hiscox now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, right. So let's move things on. So we've got, as I said at the top of the show, we've got the third part of our interview with Jonathan Clark, formerly head of claims at SCOR. And in this final section of the interview, we pick up the thread, and I've just asked Jonathan, or I'm about to ask Jonathan, about who's leading change in the London market and why it takes a bit of time to get a bit of traction, and how we can perhaps improve that. So here's the clip now. Cameras off, Ben, and here we go.
I'm sorry we talked about customers all the time. It's a bad habit. I think Jeremy can probably work out where we're going to go with the next question about who's running the show.
Well, yeah, I was just going to pick that up because we've talked a lot about change and change around customer and that type of thing. And I just wondered if I could kind of pick your brains about what's going to drive that change, because we've been through a period of massive disruption over the last 12 months, and we're in this period of transition where individual organizations are working out what their business and operating models are going to look like in the next 2, 3, 5 years or whatever. And at the same time, we've got this modernization agenda going on with the Future at Lloyd's and Blueprint 2. And also there is a lot of technology around and innovation and a lot of noise there as well. So I just wondered, what are the drivers for real change? Do you think is it going to be the big brokers, or is it something going to cut through, or is it going to be what's going to drive?
Okay. Well, I think you've probably got three factors coming into play, Jeremy. One, I think we've discussed in great detail. It's customers and some of the innovators around customer. Yeah. I think will be big drivers of change. And I think as Ben has already said here, some of the insurtechs, some of those innovators are definitely going to make us think. I think we have to look external more, but actually see how really great organizations work with customers. I think in London, we're very fortunate, in fact, that there is that alphabetic spaghetti of LMA, IUA, etc. And actually, I think there is now a genuine movement, and there has been for some time, between those groups for change. And obviously, the CII and others are involved in it. But the third component, I think, is the capital providers. A lot of the capital providers are pretty paper agnostic as to how they take risk onto the books. But it's interesting to see, the likes of Convex, the likes of Liberty, and obviously SCOR, who I'm very familiar with. And look at the investments SCOR have made in London, using multiple platforms, multiple distribution within their single risks business. You've seen Liberty doing the same thing. Yeah. So I think you've got those three components of customer, the market itself, and the market organizations. And I think don't underestimate, I think we've got some really good people in those organizations now. And I think they've heard the alarm bells, and I think they're on it. But I think ultimately the capital providers are going to say, well, is this working for us? And they will be one of the arbiters of what happens, I think. So you've got that link, customer, capital provider, and obviously the brokers are part of that whole chain. And I'm not leaving them out, but I just think that they're linked to customer because they're bringing those customers to the market.
And it sounds like you're saying, Jonathan, that more of the change could happen on the carrier's side, really, in the sense of how they adapt to this. Is that fair?
Well, I think if you look at the carriers who are in London and some of the really big players, you think historically when Ace were in London, and they would work their papers, wouldn't they? And I think Andrew was pretty open about that. That's what he's doing. But if you look at them now as Chubb, and you look at the distribution they've got and the capacity that they've got in their local operations, where are they going to write? Are they going to write in London? They're going to write in Australia? They're going to write in New York? They're going to write in Chicago? And I'm not saying they've made those decisions yet, but London has to then create value for them to want to bring to use the London paper. And clearly at the moment, those big capital players still see value in London. And they still see value in the marketplace and the subscription marketplace, and all the unique skills that we talk about. But I think that over the next 3 to 5 years, as capital becomes pressured, as we go through the rebuild after COVID, my sense, not necessarily my absolute area of expertise, is that they will look again, because they'll want to say, where's our best place to be putting this?
Yeah. And also that potential for the digitalization of those carriers, isn't it? Those large players like Chubb and Liberty. And I know this through working, quite closely with them, what some of the things are that they're looking at, and the reality is reams of projects that they're looking at, and every single one of them has a digital component.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which ultimately, you can see the end game is MI at their fingertips and the control over the business, and and in the end, that's what competition is about, isn't it? It's about who's got the knowledge and the data and the power. That's the value.
And I think that's right, Ben. And also, if you look at it, think of where we're all sitting today. Okay, now I actually am sitting in the UK today. Okay.
Yeah.
But I could as easily be anywhere else in the world. And the knowledge I have probably might go as it does for you and as it does for you, for Jeremy, Ben. And I think my sense is that's also something we need to be mindful of, because what London has had for a long, long time is that ability for people to meet in the street, to collaborate. The steering committee on claims, the way in which leaders and brokers can put together the package for the client, get the capacity, is a great strength. But if you are more digital, to your point, Ben, if you can have a distributed workforce that's highly skilled, it becomes a threat.
Yeah.
And I think you take us back to, where are the issues? It's that capital is agnostic as to where capital plays out, provided it gets its return. And I think that's got to be something that we've got to have on our agenda. At the moment, London's pretty well placed on that, because we can see the big players still very happy to invest here.
And something I wanted to ask you was about claims, because it seems to me in this whole digital era, and you talked about it earlier on, about the knowledge and the data and the legacy is often used in a bad way, but legacy experience that the big institutions have in claims, but don't seem to have capitalized on, in my view, in the past.
Yeah.
They could release that into both the sales and the business development space and into the purpose space. They would be incredibly powerful things, wouldn't they?
I think so. It always interests me with claims. We always talk about it's the moment of truth, or it's the shop window. But ultimately, claims is about delivering the promise that we've made, and it's that simple. And if we want people to trust us, we have to have a purpose of settling claims fairly and quickly. But for our own organisations, we need to learn from them. And I was quite lucky when I worked at SCOR. I was head of claims for single risks, our insurance operations. But we worked with a great team. So as part of a team with underwriters, actuaries, risk modelers, pricing, and we got together regularly. And part of my job was to debrief what have we seen on claims. And the nice thing was it was a balance of both the formal, the written document, but also more critically, the informal. And the coming together and the challenge sessions around what were we seeing, what were we learning. And I think, having those skills for a unified business is something that London could really start to pull around, and actually have a unified profession, if you want to call it that, in London. And then we've got something that customers do actually care about, which is, look, there's been 10 failures of pipelines around the world. What were they about? Well, actually, they all failed on the corner because gas does actually have some particles in it and it rubs the corners. So you probably need to be a bit aware of that, or whatever it is. And I think then also in that, our leaders need to lead, and part of that leadership is feeding back that knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think, I was very lucky. I worked in a business that wanted to build that claims profile. It's challenging because you were challenging thoughtful colleagues who want to know what's happening so that they can learn. And I think, again, London's had moments that we've been very good at how we've learned from claims, particularly on Nat Cat. We've looked at the work we're doing with the satellites. We've thought about it. It's been well led. But I think there's a broader experience that we can bring to the table working together. And I think it would be a pity if we don't take that opportunity as well, because if you learn from your claims, you understand risk and you start to understand a different model. And I suppose probably leads me to a small theme, if I may, about talent, which is perhaps the same theme. I think we're kind of, at the moment, what we're doing is we're replacing a generation that trained on the job, particularly in claims. And they trained, with the director, and they were mentored, and yes, they got professionally qualified, but actually the key thing was they'd been trained exhaustively through. And most of us actually started in personal lines. And it's interesting, I talked to some colleagues in the US the other day, and all of us started on personal lines or small commercial. And we learned our skills so that by the time we were doing the big commercial, we probably handled 2,000 or 3,000 claims and started to get a feel for where customers came from. And I do sort of think that one of the really good things that we could do in London is actually not just in claims, but underwriting more generally, is build on the academy that we've started on, which is training, but also work getting an awarding body, getting qualifications. You'll be unsurprised to find that I think the CII could have quite a role in that. But it just, again, seems to me that if you come back to some of the issues, culture, attitude, skills, we've got the toolkit there. And one of the things that I would love to see is, Lloyd's, the LMA, the IUA, all working with the CII to just start to develop, that unified view of a marketplace, because that makes you very effective, I think. And I just think there's an opportunity there as well. And I think most of our talk today has been about people, it's been about culture, and it's been about inclusiveness. And I think that's really where the edge can lie, because we're not an algorithm-based market. All of the people that have looked in the past, PwC, Deloitte, others, have all pointed towards that need for that what's going on here skill. And I just sort of feel there's more we could do with that. If we've got good technology and we've got really good people, you're in play, aren't you?
So here's the thought, Jonathan. Should we get rid of the word claims and call it the promise fulfillment function in future?
Well, I've always felt that's what we should. Well, no, it's interesting. Ellis, sadly, a bit of history. Ellis and Buckle in 1995, we produced a brochure that's called Delivering the Promises. And when I came into insurance, Introduction to Insurance, paragraph 4 of page 1, basically said, insurance is about making promises. The hard piece is delivering the promises. Now, I'm not sure that's what, and so I think if I were a customer, that's what I want to hear. We do have emotive words, claims. I think it comes back to purpose. I think, your job in claims is to settle claims quickly, fairly within the contract, but also to communicate clearly to the clients what's going to be happening, when, and what it might mean for them, and to be prepared to negotiate that. And ultimately, you're a deal maker. It's important we have the detailed technicals, because it's important we have all the training, but we've got to reach out to clients and make sure we do the right deals for them, and that what they've bought is what they get out. And again, that's been a theme we've explored previously, but I see it more than ever now. And rebuilding that trust is very important, I think, on a global basis as much as locally.
Yeah, I just think it's, in the end, it is about language, as you said earlier on, and I think that it is a slightly semantic difference, but if we're talking about, if I'm putting my marketing hat on, I would say, well, claims is a bit difficult, isn't it? Because it kind of puts the customer on the back foot before they've even started, and so and it sort of creates a bit of a culture around that, doesn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah, no, it's a really good point, Ben. I think you're right. We've got to be there. I mean, something I'm looking at with somebody at the moment is to be there, knowing it's happening, to be there in real time with your clients, and to be alongside them in those first few difficult moments. And that's, it's actually where the technology is going to be fantastic, because we can get the right policy in front of us. So that's why I think the triage component of the blueprint is so critical. But behind it, we've got to deliver that 24/7 to global customers who will be looking to be supported. And I think, Ben, if you do that, you move it from being a claim to being an event has occurred. Yeah. Does it fall within the ambit of the policy? Yeah. What are the issues for the client? And let's start to plan a project that gets that client back where they were before this event happened. And if we call it that, then I think we start to use a better language. Now, but you're more practiced than me, so I think you'll find better language.
Well, it was pretty rubbish, really. But I'm not getting paid for it today, Jonathan. But I do think there's a whole big rich space there, though, which could be used in all sorts of different segments of the market to describe what the promise of that delivery is. Yeah. And yet we use one word, and it seems to be used the world over, except that we get the S off in America. That's the only difference, isn't it? So it is. But it also is symptomatic, I think, of modernisation, I think, as well, and actually saying that we're not just a bubble of insurance, a sort of legal. And a sort of quasi-legal thing that you deal with. We're actually, as you've rightly said, a customer-centric industry. And as my question, I guess, to you is: do you think that the COVID and everything else? This has been the perfect storm for that change, because it's been said before. The industry's moving to be more customer-centric, and then the market hardens, and underwriters and brokers behave like they always have.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting question. I suppose again, the two components, aren't there? Number one, what do we mean by the market hardening? Because it may be that we price risk properly or more effectively, and provided our costs of distribution are acceptable, the expenses are acceptable, that probably is legitimate. I think what's important in a hardening market is that we don't necessarily do scope creep on the policies. I mean, inverse scope creep. So that clients become confused as to what they've bought. But I think the hardening market does drive an opportunity, and I think COVID drives that opportunity. That you're spot on, that there's been such a debate around what clients were looking for. Surely this has to be the time for us to look at our language and speak in a friendlier or more thoughtful way to our clients. But I say, one of the things I really do like in the blueprint is that thought that you get the claim quickly in front of the right person, because that's what a lot of my career has been about, and it being in organizations and trying to make sure that happens. But, when we've got sophisticated tracking, we know things are happening, we know with our clients that they can tell us very quickly when things occur. I think we've got to be there alongside them quickly. And so that speed is around responding to their needs and being with them, I think. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that seems to me to be where we can take it.
I agree with you. I think it's a tricky area. I mean, I've been, for my sins, been doing quite a lot of work with lawyers through this period, and there are obviously areas where you need lawyers, and there are reasons and there are types of claim that are disputes, as it were. They will be they're a cover for a dispute. So they're a dispute. They're not. It's not a typical sort of product. It's an unusual product in some areas. So I think it's quite tricky. But I wonder whether we're talking really about sort of more this education of segmenting the market a bit better and taking all the jargon away and saying, look, there's a dispute product, right, and that's how it works. And it might not always be that pleasant. You probably need a lawyer. That's it. The thing that gets me a bit is sometimes that lawyerish stuff spills over into everything, and you see them on LinkedIn, don't you? You see the American lawyer said, right, yes, you should never let anybody off anything at all. This COVID case is a fantasy, and And that sort of annoys me, because I think, well, what kind of right do you have to tar the whole industry and the brands in the industry with the brush that it's all going to be a fight, which it isn't, clearly. And 99% of claims are not a fight, right?
The vast majority of claims are paid in the right way and are dealt with. So absolutely right. I think one of the issues that did sweep through the market, and I think it's now gone, was when we went from peril to all risks. It did confuse a lot of us, because we had to remember that instead of looking for a fire, we just had to look if there was some damage.
Yeah.
And we're still debating some of those things. And I think what we need to perhaps do a bit more with our clients, and maybe it's something as a market we can do with ARMIC, with the risk managers, with RIMS in the US, is just do a bit more scenario work. Yeah. Let's just get an understanding of what is it your clients would like. Let's have a look and say, does it work? Let's do some dry runs of some very simple scenarios. You've just had a fire in your warehouse in Poland and it happened because of this. How does it work? And I think some very simple scenarios that we as a market could put out there would really help people understand how the policies respond. And then we're going to make quick decisions around it. It is often difficult because sometimes we don't know the cause of loss for some period of time.
Yeah.
But as somebody said to me the other day, when I see a fire, I generally know it's a fire. I don't always know quite how it started, but let's start with the notion it's a fire before we start to debate what it was. And I think that sometimes we just forget to do the basics, and I think that again we've got a great opportunity to do that.
And that decisiveness, therein lies some of the, or indecisiveness sometimes, therein lies some of the cost, doesn't it, really? Because actually the efficiency, as with all the claims teams I've worked with, is how quickly you deal with it and the judgment you make at first notification of loss.
Well, I think that's the key thing, is to make reasonable business judgments, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, all of us in claims know that there's one real pressure, Ben, which is this. We've always got asymmetric information. We can ask questions till we're blue in the face, but we're always going to have asymmetric, because the client may well have asymmetric information as well. They don't know precisely what's happened, and we're asking them. What they do know is that this incident's shut them down, and that it's going to cost them, $1 million a month, and that's what they want to talk to us about. And I think that's a really tough call for us all. And ultimately, as leaders, that's what we're paid to do, make decisions. And we don't always get them right, but I think that it can be a really critical factor, as you say, in defining your marketplace. So I think that's a good point. It's a critical feature of what we do.
Great. Well, thank you ever so much, Jonathan. I think we could carry on talking for hours. It's always a delight to talk to you. So thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
For coming on, and perhaps we can have you back in a few months and we can reflect on things as everything starts to settle down, and we look towards the future in a bit more detail.
Well, I look forward to that. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Ben. Great fun talking to you. And as always.
Listen back to the interviews, isn't it, Ben, and just reflect on some of the things that have been said. I noted down kind of communication, people skills, culture, language, and just getting back to basics, understanding what we're here for, and delivering that service. So really, really good end of the interview there from Jonathan.
Yes, I think listening to it again, that link between purpose and then what you deliver, and understanding what the customers really want and aligning with that. And I think Jonathan was very good on articulating the opportunity in the market for having a more intelligent type of product, I think, is what we're talking about. One which actually does meet more of the needs of the clients when they do actually have an issue. And that is about data, but it's as he said, it's also about the ability of experienced people to make judgments. And it's it's absolutely my experience of working with claims team, and I don't think that will change. But it's not just the hard data; it's the soft knowledge as well. So we talk about technology a lot, but that soft knowledge is incredibly valuable at times when, as Jonathan said, there is asymmetric information, which is probably most of the time in the world. And my point, I think, was how do you articulate and explain that to the customer? And I don't think the insurance industry does that very well at the moment. I think it could improve there.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks once again for Jonathan coming on the show and sharing his thoughts and insights. I will put the interview in its entirety up on the website, so you can watch it all the way through. But obviously you can watch the chunks of the interview as well. They'll be on the website to download. So final things, Ben, what are you doing this weekend? Anything interesting?
I've got twin daughter and son, and it's their birthday, so we'll have a little bit of a birthday cake.
That's interesting. I've got it's my dad's birthday today, actually, and
Happy birthday, Jeremy's dad.
Yeah, indeed. And I put together I don't know if I can find it here. I'll play it if I can, and I'll also send it to you. A little birthday. No, I don't think I can. I'll have to send it to you. But yeah, I put together a little Chris Whitty inspired birthday celebration thing. So I'll send that across to you. If it's someone's birthday, I will make sure I have that jingle ready and loaded up, and I'll play it for whoever's birthday it is. So get on the chat and let me know, and we'll play it. It's quite funny. It's a bit of fun. As always.
Good, yeah.
Good. Right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a good weekend, and we shall see you next week. Goodbye.
Yeah. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks for the comments. Bye.
Burgess and Bolton's Weekly Wrap Up.